smelling coffee, birds are singing just outside. Here comes your mercy, streaming in with the morning light. My heart's racing, waking up to your smile, saying good morning. Saying good morning.
So good morning and welcome back. So today we're on Psalm 2. I will start by reading the whole thing and then we'll discuss some of its meaning. It says, "Why do the heathen rage and the people imagine a vain thing? The kings of the earth set themselves and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, Let us break their bands asunder and cast away their cords from us. He that sitteth in the heavens shall laugh, the Lord shall have them in derision. Then shall he speak unto them his wrath, and vex them in his sore displeasure. Yet have I set my king upon my holy hill of Zion. I will declare the decree. The Lord hath said unto me, Thou art my son, this day have I begotten thee. Ask of me, and I shall give thee the heathen for thine inheritance, and the uttermost parts of the earth for thy possession. Thou shalt break them with a rod of iron. Thou shalt dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel. Be wise now, therefore, O ye kings, be instructed, ye judges of the earth. Serve the Lord with fear, and rejoice with trembling. Kiss the Son, lest he be angry, and ye perish from the way, when his wrath is kindled but a little. Blessed are all they that put their trust in him." Okay, so according to Acts 4:25, this psalm was obviously written by David. This psalm expresses amazement that the governments and cultures of the earth would ignore God or try to defy God. So verses 1 to 3, it kind of breaks up in the sections. So I'm going to go section by section. Verses 1 to 3. Really, the verse 1 is a rhetorical question. Why do the heathen rage and the people imagine a vain thing? Obviously, there really isn't an answer. He's not really looking for an answer. He's more of like, why would they do this? People, governments, and rulers have, since the time of Babel, banded themselves together against God, and really for what reason? To no avail. I mean, clearly they've, you can't go against God. That's obvious. And they oppose both the Lord and his anointed one. This is verse 2, against the Lord and against his anointed one. This is obviously Jesus Christ. So people who oppose God in Christ consider God to be a tyrant or a God of bondage, a God of slavery, God of, ultimate control and removing you from freedom and keeping you restricted and, all these various things. But Spurgeon said, "To a graceless neck, the yoke of Christ is intolerable, but to the saved sinner, it is easy and light. We may judge ourselves by this. Do we love that yoke, or do we wish it to be cast from us?" Since the world began, people have been opposing God. Leaders, governments, kings, rulers. I mean, look at our country right now. I mean, they're strategically and gradually going out of their way to try and eliminate him. Obviously, it won't happen. Obviously, they will be completely unsuccessful. As we go on to verses 4 to 6, it says, verses 4 to 6, "He that sitteth in heavens shall laugh, the Lord shall have them in derision. Then shall he speak unto them, and in his wrath, and vex them or distress them in his deep displeasure." So, "Yet have I set my king upon my holy hill of Zion." So he laughs. Okay, it's not. There's a sense of humor in the idea that anyone, be it king, ruler, government, anybody really could stand against God. And God is sitting. Okay, this is what verse 4 says. He that sitteth in the heavens. So he's sitting. He's not pacing back and forth, going, okay, I got to figure out what I'm going to do with these people. I mean, I'm terrified. I'm shaking in my boots because they're trying to oppose me. They're trying to defy me, trying to ignore me. God has no worries. He's got no fears. And if he had any fears, it certainly wouldn't be of you or me or any government on this planet. So on that note, why would we? Why would we be afraid if we, as the last verse in this psalm says, trust in the Lord? If we put our trust in him, then why are we afraid of a government or a leader or a ruler or, some of the other moronical people we have trying to point us in the direction? So it says God laughs. Okay, it's this like how, remember David and Goliath. Okay, so David went up against Goliath and Goliath laughed at him. He says, am I a dog that you come at me with sticks? And it's the idea that what are you going to do? I'm so much bigger than you. Now, in David and Goliath's story, David obviously took down Goliath because David was serving the Lord. So that adds to, why should we be afraid of our government? Why should we be afraid of Big Brother? But Goliath laughed at him initially. And God's sitting up there, relaxed, laughing, like, what do you think you can really do? What do you think you're going to accomplish trying to defy God, ignore God, or eliminate God? People have been doing it since the beginning of time and have not been able to do it. You're not any brighter than any of those people. And the earth is his footstool. So he's sitting with his feet up. He's relaxed. Okay, he's got his hands behind his head. He's just chilling because he's got nothing to worry about. Least of all, our leaders and those people in culture who want to do away with Christians. And then I said God announces to man that he's established a king. He says, I set my king upon my holy hill of Zion. God is announcing, I have established a king. I have somebody who is going to rule over you. All you people who try to stand against God, God is saying, I've got somebody that I'm establishing as a king, higher than any king or government you have. And no government or military or rebellion will overthrow him. And obviously, I think we know who this king is, King Jesus, of course. And so then we go to verses 7 to 9. I will declare a decree. The Lord hath said unto me, Thou art my son, this day have I begotten thee. Ask of me, and I shall give thee the heathen, or the nations, for thine inheritance, and the uttermost parts of the earth for thy possession. Thou shalt break them with a rod of iron. Thou shalt dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel. This implies that the Son himself is speaking. Jesus Christ is saying, the Lord said unto me, Thou art my son. And then this was in the Gospels too. This is my son in whom I'm well pleased. So Jesus Christ in this psalm, through David, is saying, the Father said to me that I am his son, and today I have begotten thee. The word begotten is an important one because it's different than the word created. Jesus Christ was not created. He's been there since the beginning. It describes a relationship between two beings of the same essential nature and being. Jesus was not created again, and a man creates a statue but begets a son. Jesus Christ is the Anointed One. We know that already. and he holds the nations as an inheritance. God has given Jesus Christ the world as an inheritance, his children, us believers, as an inheritance. And in Revelation 1:15, which kind of built on that, I believe it's 11:15, excuse me, from Revelations 11:15 says, "And the seventh angel sounded, and there were great voices in heaven saying, The kingdom of this world are become the kingdoms of our Lord and of his Christ, and he shall reign forever and ever." So that is the fulfillment of this psalm, the world and the nations and everything on it being Christ's inheritance and Christ's kingdom, and he will reign forever without being overthrown. Now, the nations and the empires and the governments are like clay pots. Okay, as this is verse 9, "Thou shalt break them with a rod of iron, thou shalt dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel." So the nations, the governments, the people who try to stand against God are basically cheap clay pots, and Christ shows up with a rod of iron. And if you've ever seen what a rod of iron can do to a clay pot, it is completely destroyed. It is shattered into pieces, and there is no possibility whatsoever of it being stronger than a rod of iron. So this is what this psalm is saying. The nations and empires and governments are like clay pots, and opposing God is futile and foolish, because the strength of God is far more than yours. And then verses 10 to 12, this is the closing section, it says, "Be wise now therefore, O ye kings, be instructed, ye judges of the earth. Serve the Lord with fear, and rejoice with trembling. Kiss the Son, lest he be angry, and ye perish from the way, when his wrath is kindled but a little. Blessed are all they that put their trust in him." This portion really expresses the plea from the writer David to the people who are trying to stand against God. And he's saying, be wise. Don't he goes back, you go back to verse 1. Why do the nations try to defy God? Why do the nations imagine something that's not going to come to anything? Why do they waste their time? It's rhetorical, but he goes on to verses 10 to 12 and sets himself in a warning. He says, be wise, kings and rulers and governments and people who stand against God. Stand with him, not against him. And this should be a plea to everyone. I mean, you don't have to be a ruler to be advised not to go against God. And David goes on to say, follow God's instruction. It's this. Why would I put so much effort against somebody I know that I could never defeat? Ever. No matter how hard I tried. And David says, just be wise. It's not smart to go against God. I promise you. He says, stand with God, not against him. And surrender to his will. This kiss the Son thing is kind of like an act of submission, an act of it's. I'm not really sure how they put it. Let me see if my Bible has a brief commentary. So kiss the Son really. It's basically, it just says submit. So I think it's, let's look at verse 12. It's an act of homage and submission, basically. It's kiss the Son, submit, put your allegiance, I guess, to him. Humble ourselves. It says, serve the Lord with fear and rejoice with trembling. Humble yourself. Understand who God is. Don't go against him. And then, because pride will cause you to perish when his wrath is revealed, and there's no getting around it. And finally, blessed are those who put their trust in him. This man is humbled, submitted, joyful, and with peace, at peace with God. This is the righteous man from Psalm 1. This is the one that is planted by trees, or a tree planted by rivers of water, a man that does not walk in the counsel of the ungodly, and meditates on the word day and night. This man is humbled, submitted, and joyful because he understands who God is, and blessed, happy, provided for is the man who puts his trust in God. Why would I think, if I paid any attention to history and all the governments and people and leaders and whatnot have tried to oppose God of the universe? And I look back and I try to see anybody who's been successful. And I think, this time I've figured it out. It's this, okay, the first thing that came to my mind was Inspector Gadget. And Dr. Claw, Professor Claw, whatever his name was, never succeeds in getting Gadget. At the end of every episode, he says, "I'll get you, Gadget." And he never does. This idea that you could keep going against somebody who's undefeatable with this new plan, this new idea, thinking, finally I will outsmart God. Finally I will trick him. Finally I will figure out a way to eliminate him. Now, if I recognize that God is the source of life for everything on this planet, life support, God is our life support for everything on this world. And I thought, maybe I should pull the plug. What would happen if you were, first of all, I mean, it couldn't, but what would happen if you could eliminate God? What would happen if you could get him gone? Everything would die, like right now. I mean, there'd be no source of life whatsoever. And really, what would drive somebody to do that? What would drive somebody to want to eliminate the creator of the universe? Again, it's like it's in the first few verses. It's this idea that people consider God a tyrant, God a mean guy with his finger on the world, trying to get them to cower and to fear. But it's so much different than that. And if we look at everything at face value, sure, I mean, okay, nobody wants a set of rules. Well, then you've totally misinterpreted what God is here for, what God is doing, what Christ has done. The rules are there to keep us safe. You know, it started with Eve in the garden. God said, I've got one thing that I'm going to ask you not to do. That's it. You can have free reign of everything I have, except for this one tree, this one tree bearing this one fruit. Don't touch it. That's all I ask. And the devil comes in. He says to Eve, he says, really? I mean, what would be the big deal? Why would he tell you couldn't eat just this one fruit? I mean, everything else is good. All the other fruit, good. What's wrong with this one? And he plants this idea that God is restricting me. God is making rules that are irrational. Why couldn't I just eat some fruit? So she bought it. She said, you know what? You have a point. And she took a bite. Now, the sin wasn't initially taking the bite. The sin was actually deciding in her mind that she knew better than God. And now, from that point on, death showed up. Sin showed up. Now, was that rule bad? Was it removing her freedom? Was it eliminating her opportunities? Of course not. It was protecting her, protecting Adam and her from the consequence of dying. God's laws are there to protect us. And as 1 John says, his commandments aren't grievous. They're not burdensome. We should look forward to obeying because we claim to love God. And he puts boundaries in place because he loves us. I tell my kids when they were little they couldn't run into the street. That was a rule. That was a boundary. Not because I was a tyrant, but because I didn't want to see them getting hit by a car. It's the same with God. He knows best. I mean, that's just the way it is. So I hope these messages will bless you. Each psalm is different. I think we'll cover different things as we go. We may break them up a little bit here and there if they get too long. But read through the Psalms. It's a glorious book. I give you that. And kind of study it for yourself and see what you come up with. I would ask you to kind of respond, comment, let me know anything you notice about any of my lessons, any of my videos, and kind of keep me up to date on how I'm doing. Like I said at the beginning, I like feedback. I want to hear that either I'm giving God's word correctly, or at least close, and if I'm not, and if I'm spilling out beans that aren't any good, then I think somebody should let me know. But thanks for watching. God bless, and we'll see you next time. Probably tomorrow if I have time to go through Psalm 3 tonight. So enjoy the rest of your day. God bless.